This show brought to you by our friends at RacingPicks. Not only does RacingPicks bring you these podcasts, they bring you great information on a daily basis. Sign up for their expert picks. It's free. All you have to do is give your email and you get terrific content. I've written a couple things for them. Matt Bernier writes regularly. He's been on a hot streak of epic proportions. Andrew Champagne, other players as well, bringing you their thoughts. Lots of good stuff on RacingPicks.com. You support them, you're supporting us. So go to RacingPicks.com today and sign up for their expert picks. Hello and welcome to the Racing Picks Players Podcast. This is our show heading into Woodbine Mile Weekend. It's basically another Woodbine takeover. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you in the Degenerate Flophouse once again, going to be heading back to the Brooklyn Bunker shortly, at least for a little while, but still up here in Saratoga Springs. And I've been to Woodbine this weekend the last 4 or 5 years. I'll admit, I'm a little sad not to be there this time around, but the good news is we've got some great racing and we've got great guests to talk with you about it. Then towards the end of the show, we will look back down to opening weekend at Belmont. But coming up, we've got Dawn Lupul, we've got Jeff Bratt, we've got Jason Portundo, and we've got Nick Tammaro. Stay tuned. The show will begin right after this. This show is brought to you in part by Stable Duel. A new breed of gaming is here. Think about traditional horse playing and fantasy sports merged into one fun and convenient package. Great way to get action all day playing on Stable Duel for controlled costs, fun, quirky, different rules. Check it all out at StableDuel.com. To play, you'll need to download the Stable Duel app. They do have games for Woodbine this weekend. Might be a great time to check it out. Go and download the Stable Duel app today. First up on the show today, a returning guest, but she hasn't been with us in a minute. Very happy to have her back. She has been a Woodbine analyst. She is a social media presence extraordinaire. These days, she is a professional gambler, working mainly in horse racing and also sounds like the NFL. Maybe we'll ask her about that for a minute. Dawn Lupul, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Oh, thanks, Peter. Thanks so much. I'm doing very well. Yeah. You know, that intro, when you walk into a dinner party and they say, "What do you do?" And I'm a professional gambler. Crickets. Yeah. It's, but when you say I'm an investor, they automatically think stock market. They're like, "Ooh, tell us more." It's a fun game, isn't it?
Mike Maloney, in his book Betting with an Edge, has a wry joke about this exact thing where you go to the neighborhood cocktail party and say you're a professional gambler and they seat you next to the drug dealer. Yeah,
so true. So true. Like, I mean, except now, you know, it's funny because it is getting more mainstream now. I digress because we have a very important race to get into. But you even see now with the NFL, like the TV coverage, they're actually talking about spreads now, which is, we've come a long way.
It's really true. I mean, the whole deal with the PASPA and all that, and state by state here, just getting some healthier attitudes about gambling. One question about you generally before we dive into the Singspiel here: how has it been going so far in this new role? It's quite a change, I would imagine.
Well, yes and no, because this is something I've done this my whole life. Like, it's always, my dad bought his first racehorse when I was 6 years old. And I remember they used to go to the races. It was night, you know, in the evenings. And then I would wake up in the morning. There'd be a little pile of money beside my bed because they would bet $2 across on the horses for me. So it's, the whole gambling thing has been in my mind for forever. I've done so many aspects in the industry. I've been a morning line odds maker. Obviously, I've been in the industry for a long time. I've trained, owned, bred horses. So I've kind of covered the gamut. And I've always gone back to the betting because it intrigues me. Like, I don't have to tell you. I don't have to tell any of our listeners or viewers either. You know what an amazing thing that it is to do. It's a lot of fun. It's a good mental workout.
Don't forget Race Caller. You gotta get Race Caller. You gotta find room for that on your business card.
Yeah, and actually that was, I guess, my last thing I've done in racing was earlier this year. I was invited by Perth Racing in Australia to go there and participate in their International Women's Day. So that was back in March. And then funny enough, I got back on March like the 13th, and then the world changed right after that. So I'm glad I snuck that Australia trip in the right time.
Very wise. We'll get back on the road one of these days. For me, I've been writing about this and talking about this. I've been in Toronto this weekend for the last 4 or 5 years, and I miss it terribly. It also coincides with my anniversary, so it's become like this really important thing to Susan and to me to be up there. Hopefully next year we can get back. This year we'll be enjoying from afar, and it's a great car to racing on Saturday. I'm very psyched to be talking about it on this show and elsewhere. And we have you here today to talk about our first graded stakes race on the day. It's the Grade 3 Singspiel going 1.25 miles on the Woodbine turf. Breaking news, we'll give credit where credit is due. Ron Gearking of the Place with the Letters, the DRF, just tweeted out that Admiralty Pier will not be going here and will instead be taking up an assignment in the Woodbine Mile. Where does that leave you in this year's Singspiel, Dawn?
Yeah, he was definitely the cog in the wheel because albeit obviously distance limitations, we would look at that as handicappers, and the connections probably looked at that as well. I think he actually had a good shot in here for a couple of reasons. I think I'm not sure about the mile. I actually preferred him in this race if I were going to bet him in a particular spot. But with him out, the big question mark now is, well, I guess he would have been the big question mark before. It was Tiz Aslam. Tiz Aslam, I don't know what to make of him. I mean, that was his last race. It was on the synthetic, so who cares? It's not a big thing, but it was so poor. And I didn't think he looked very good physically coming across the wire at the end of it. He's been working extremely well since then, so it may have just been a tired horse on the wrong surface on the day. He is a graded stakes winner on synthetic, though, so it's not like he completely hates it. His game is one way or no way. It's to the front, and that's why jockey Steve Bain's gotten along with him so well. He just lets him roll. Last start, if you look at the comment line, it says bumped at the start. He hesitated. He did a little bunny hop coming out of the gate, gave up his path, and then it was taken. And yes, he was bumped, but it was his own fault. He caused his own disaster there. If he can come out and break, I think he's got a great chance to go all the way. When I looked at this race, Peter, I don't know if you agree with me or not. We're looking at a bunch of allowance horses running in a Grade 3. There's a lot of just like horses that really don't have a whole lot of stakes cred to their like in their resume. Tiz Aslam is probably the classiest in that way, with 6 graded wins, 4 of those coming on the turf. So to me, the race pivots on him. Does he break and just take them all the way? I don't know that the turf is necessarily favoring that style. It does when it gets really warm here and there hasn't been, that much rain, but it's definitely feeling more fall-like. We had racing yesterday on the turf, on Thursday on the turf course, and horses seem to be happier coming from off the pace. So the course might be not exactly with him, but he's a big player for me. If he breaks, he's a huge question mark.
He's got the class angle, and I do feel like that last workout, and I haven't seen anything particular in the workout report or any inside info, but just looking at the time of that 5 furlong move in the minute and 2 does maybe signal a little bit of a return to form. And certainly without having Admiralty Pier to knock heads with potentially on the front end, I can definitely see the case. It's hard to go too wrong leaning on class on the grass, even these days, even though it's such an old school angle. The horse that I feel like might class up best with Tiz Aslam and the rest of these, and you could accuse me of being a homer here because I am friendly with the owners, but number 9, Nakamura, I think is a very interesting horse who I do think, while the Grade 1 and 2 level might be beyond his scope at this time, I do think fits nicely at the Grade 3 level, especially a Grade 3 like this that is largely comprised of allowance horses. So I was wondering if this one in the 3rd race off the bench, I know this spot was picked out a long time ago for Nakamura, been carefully handled by Graham Motion and the folks over at Staghawk Stables, who are also the folks associated with the Walton Whitman Brewery, where folks have seen me do our horse player happy hour shows the last few weeks. I think Nakamura has a big chance in here. Did you have any others you wanted to put forward as potentials to use in exotics or maybe even for the top spot?
Yeah, we talk about class. I mean, let's face it, other than Tislam, and his current form is completely up in the air. As far as I can tell, Nakamura fits very well with the rest of them. There are no world beaters in this field. I'm concerned he's going to be overbet. Kazushi Kimura is a really good jockey, very good. But his strength isn't necessarily turf routes. And this is one of these races, a mile and a quarter. You have to really be there at the right time. So I'm willing to take a chance against betting him because I do think he's going to be overbet. That's my only knock on the horse. Can he win? Of course. If I'm playing horizontals, he's in there, definitely on my ticket. I'm not going to leave a horse like that out. Graham Motion comes here usually with serious intent. In the last 5 years, I looked up his stat. He's 12 for 54 on the turf, running in stake races here, graded stakes. The ROI is dismal though. It's like $1.57, which again goes to the fact that these horses they ship in. They go, ooh, Graham Motion. So I happen to love, by the way, one of my faves. But they are overbet. I almost prefer the other horse. Now I don't know the 4 standard deviation. The other horse of Graham Motion. If he's at his best, and again, another horse completely up in the air in terms of form, the trip to Qatar may have been more, taken more of a toll on him than we know yet. But at his best, he would compete in this field. He's going to be a better price. They may have shipped him. If he were Graham's only horse in here, I would really like him because sometimes you throw another one on the trailer, right? You're trucking one, you may as well truck 2 or 3. Who cares at that point? So I don't know that if he is fitting that spot. But Justin Stein listed to ride. He's riding holes in the wind since coming back out of retirement. So he interests me quite a bit at a bit of a healthier price. If I'm playing this race from a contest perspective, I'm taking standard deviation. I think as a contest bet, he'd be okay. If I'm playing it as a cash, I'm probably playing Nakamura because it seems logical. He's got the figures on turf. And if I don't know. I have to watch post-parade, I think, because Tislam still interests me quite a bit.
It's always tricky when you have runners like Tislam and Standard Deviation, who there's more talent there than what you've seen recently. But I think you can probably, given the hands they're in with Graham Motion and Roger Atfield, I'd be inclined to include rather than disinclude. Sometimes when you see a trainer like that put a horse in a spot like this off these questionable running lines, they're doing it for a reason. So I think those are 3 very reasonable ways to go. The post parade will indicate, give us some more valuable intel, as will the tote board. But Dawn, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts about this one. Would love to have you on again soon to talk more about these crazy adventures you're having in this new phase of your life.
Yeah, sounds good. It is crazy. It's a little lonely, I have to say. Anybody who's ever pursued a gambling lifestyle knows it's a lot of hours spent looking at figs and watching replays, whether it's sports or horses. So it's always nice to talk to you, even if it's in this way and not face to face.
Well, Godspeed, my friend, and we'll be talking soon.
Cheers. Thanks, Peter.
Just a reminder to help us out, sign up for our email newsletter. Great way to follow everything going on across the network. Bonus content as well. If you go to inthemoneypodcast.com/email, that'll bring you right to this screen. You can also just navigate to it off of inthemoneypodcast.com. Simply enter your email. We don't bother you too much. Pretty much once a week, end of the week, get a chance to see all the content, little descriptions of the shows, etc. Some more fun stuff coming down the pike as well. Check it out, the In the Money Players newsletter. Next up on the show, very excited to have returning after a brief absence, very brief, really, when you think about it in the big picture of life, from Woodbine. You know him on Twitter, at Woodbine Bratt. Jeff Bratt, how are you, my friend?
I am so excited, Peter. This is my Christmas Eve because this is my favorite race of the season at Woodbine, year in, year out. Probably as a Canadian, I should probably say the Queen's Plate, but that's my second favorite. This is my favorite race of the season. 8 furlongs on the world-renowned E.P. Taylor turf course, the best. Let's go. I'm ready.
I love your enthusiasm, and I think you already answered my first question as to why it's your favorite. Tell me give me a memory, a random memory that pops in your head of Woodbine miles past. It as in its current incarnation, it's not that old. So
no, I know.
Yeah.
Edition number 24 coming up. Yeah, I mean, you look at the names that have won this race, trainer-wise, Drysdale, Frankel, Mark Cassie's looking to become to join those gentlemen to become the third different trainer to win it on 3 occasions. Look at the horse that have won it, Wise Dan, Tepin. Look at the fact it's been a major stepping stone towards the Breeders' Cup. You get the best of the best. I mean, obviously this year with COVID, it's different. No European horses this season, no American riders as well. But I'll tell you what, kudos to the race office here at Woodbine. You've got a mixed bag. You've got a mare taking on the boys in this spot. You've got a 3-year-old taking older rivals. Got a Preakness winner. I mean, when does a Preakness winner ever come to the Woodbine Mile? We've got that coming up in this race as well.
There's so many great storylines, and I believe they might create a nice wagering opportunity. You talked about Mark Casse and his quest to join that short list of three-peaters in the Woodbine Mile, and he's got 3 chances to go for the three-peat here. 2 of them going to be more fancied in the market than the other. But let's start with the general question of how does he have this race locked up, or do you think one of those storyline horses or one of the outsiders might be able to get into the mix here?
I don't think he's got it locked up. I don't think so, because I think that this race has come up. It's pretty tough. I mean, Starship Jubilee, she finally gets to run on her home course. That's a big time plus, although against the boys, so a tough race. And she comes up a very difficult race last time out in the Diana. You've got Value Proposition. If he just can avoid laying in his races, he's got a shot to win for Conditioner Chad Brown in here. And we're going to find out the answer to all our questions in regards to Cheryl Spites coming up on the weekend. This is the acid test, and we're going to get some answers coming up.
What's your guess? I've been a huge Cheryl Spite fan. I've talked about him. Been on air for his for both of the races so far. We obviously followed the Kentucky Derby adventure very closely. There is like at least a little bit of irony to me in ultimately scratching from the Kentucky Derby and finding a spot that in its own way is just as difficult and ambitious here. What do you think we're going to see from him?
No, I agree with that, but I think it's actually a blessing in disguise that the horse didn't go to the Derby, because I think it's just easier with a young horse like this to stay home. I know it's a grade 1 race. I know that. And it is definitely a big move up in class. I think he's going to run well. But this is a tough chore in start number 3. I'm picking against him. But if he wins, I'll be one of the happiest people around, because I like you, I've jumped on his bandwagon pretty early. I'm very curious to see how the betting public approaches him too. You know, I think he's a big number on the line, but with all the hype with him, do we get that big number come post time? That's the question mark. But you know, he's obviously bred for both surfaces. He can hail Tapeta and on the turf, but he's really good on the turf. I mean, his maiden win was arguably one of the most impressive maiden wins that we've ever seen here at Woodbine. But you're going from the grade 3 Marine, and you're beating horses like Lucky Curlin and Dotted Line. Now you got to beat horses like War of Will and March the Arch. I mean, it's a tough assignment, but we're going to get some answers to those questions today, or coming up tomorrow, I should say.
I want to talk to you about the pace in this race. So Admiralty Peter is going to run here.
Correct.
We've learned. And then Cheryl Spite, watching his various workouts, he didn't look happy to me the day that they attempted to rate him. I wonder if he might just be out there winging. What do you think is going to happen on the front end here?
Yeah, I could see that happening too. And, you know, you want to teach a horse, but you don't really want to teach a horse in a grade 1 race. You know what I mean? So if he wants to be forwardly placed, he's going to be forwardly placed. He's just naturally fast too. Judging by what Mark Casse was saying during the post position draw, I think War of Will's going to be really close too. Now, War of Will, he has this bad habit of not being able to get the starting gate effectively. He always seems to break poorly, but he's got some natural early foot, so he'll be right there in the mix of things. But no, for me, because I don't want to give away my pick, but I like a horse coming from off the pace of this race. So I like the fact that Admiralty Pier is in this. I want to make sure there's an honest pace for my selection.
We'll get there. We'll get there in a minute. I just want to run through the rest of these.
Yeah,
what about the third Casse runner in this spot? It is Olympic runner here to get a small piece, or do you think, and do you get the impression from hearing Mark Casse talk about him that he's got a chance to get the money?
I mean, we all love Pink Lloyd around these parts. We do. But Pink Lloyd and like War of Will, that's kind of a move up in class, you know, and Olympic runner hasn't won for a while now. That's obviously cause for concern. I think the huge plus with Olympic runner in here, and is owned by Gary Barber too, is that War of Will should be a little bit more prominent early on. So if things are a little bit hectic up front, an Olympic runner should be really rolling down the lane, I would feel. But this is obviously a tough chore for him. I'd be surprised if he won the race, but he's obviously a very nice horse.
would feel like one who would do well to get a minor slot, and it wouldn't surprise me based on how things set up here if that is exactly the way that it were to go. So you've tipped your hand that you're looking for a runner to come off the pace. You haven't revealed which one it's going to be. I think it's time to show your hand, my friend. Who do you
think is the worst poker player ever? I'm like one of those poker players who say, "I got a good hand. I got a good hand." I like March the Arch. He's undefeated here at Woodbine. He won the Toronto Cup. He won the King Eddie. I love the way he ran last time. He just was so good when he won that race. And all this talk about Cassie and with War of Will, Husbands has won this race in the past. I know March the Arch, he often finds trouble in races, and he can sometimes be his own worst enemy. But if you look back at his replay in the King Eddie, that's, to me, one of the most impressive performances I've seen at Woodbine so far this season.
It was a tremendous run, and he did so without the benefit of the setup he might get here. At the end of the day, I can't see past War of Will because I keep seeing the trip he's going to get in my head. And you're right about the breaks and how that could change everything if he goes left into value proposition and compromises both of their chances. But I think he's going to get the forward trip that he likes, and I think I feel like it only is going to help him at the end of the day to have Admiralty Pier in here, especially if they let Charles Spite roll. I could see him being within 2 lengths and just getting a better trip than March of the Arch, even though March of the Arch obviously fits completely on the numbers. And then it just comes down to, for me, the secondary thing, other than the trip, I imagine, is just that potentially that subtle class difference between March of the Arch, I think, is extremely good, but unproven at the Grade 1 level, versus War, who did win the legit Grade 1 last time, and of course has that Preakness on the resume. But I think no matter which one of these horses you decide you like, there's going to be a good price because there's going to be a lot of storyline money between the 3-year-old angle on Cheryl Spite, Starship Jubilee, obviously incredibly impressive resume, has the win over Sister Charlie, but for me has questions to answer at this level. And then even a runner like Value Proposition, who certainly can win, but is going to have to catch a lot of money because of if only because of the Chad Brown factor. So I think both of our horses might offer some value. I think you could potentially play both of them in your horizontal bets. Do you have a thought on wagering strategy and how you might want to approach this race on Saturday?
I've gone 4 deep on my pick 4 on this race. I'm going to use March the Arch. I'm going to use Cheryl Spite, Starship Jubilee, and War of Will. I've left out Value Proposition. That might be a massive mistake on my part. I realize that. I just don't like the lane intensities like that. He tends to be his own worst enemy in races. And if he ran well in the poker, and he might have as much upside as anybody else does in this race. But I'm going to go 4 deep to start off the sequence in here. That's all you can ask for. It's a highly competitive race, and we've got that. Who do you think, if there is a wild card horse in this race that could strike at a bit of a price, do you think, I don't even think Cheryl Spite winning the race would be a huge upset. Do you think that Starship Jubilee, do you think she's kind of the long shot in this race? Because I'm very curious to see how the betting public approaches this event.
It's such a great question. I talked with Ernie Perry about it when we did our full card analysis. I think he had a tough time making the line, trying to figure out where the money's going to go. Starship Jubilee, to me, would become interesting at around double-digit odds. Yeah. I don't think she can get that high just because there's just going to be so much attention on the big win-2 back and just the incredible class that she's shown in her career. I mean, 18 for 37. There's so much here that I feel like she's bound to be a bit overbet. I think you're probably right that Cheryl Spite is likely we won't get that 8-1 because of all the storyline stuff. I think it's a weird situation where the value plays might end up being with our favorites that we talked about, or Will and March to the Arch, the ones at the longer end of the odds spectrum, unless something very unexpected happens in the betting, I think are going to be closer to the right prices. Whereas War of Will, if it was just a normal race on a Tuesday without the storylines, I think War of Will and March the Arch would be a lot shorter than they're going to be in this spot. So I'm okay in my horizontals pinning my colors to their mast, and I'll press up War of Will a little bit in here. But
could you get 5-2? Could you get 3-1 come post time this horse, do you think?
There is 5-2 available in the UK on War of Will, and
Wow.
I've alerted some friends over there that I think that's an overlay. I think this horse, to me, is closer to a 3-2 shot, the way I see this race, than a 5-2 shot. So it's hard to know what's going to happen in terms of the tote market and what the prices will be. But I wouldn't rule it out. I think it's more likely that it'll be a true 2-1 than to get that 5-2 here. But that's good enough for me to press things up a little bit. And then, you know how it is in these markets. Sometimes you got to zig or zag depending on what they give you. But in terms of selections, I feel pretty confident going with War of Will in this spot. Any final thoughts from you, Jeff, on this year's Woodbine Mile, or a random thought elsewhere on the card that you just can't contain, perhaps?
No, I guess I'll just summarize this with the Woodbine Mile. We're going to see how good Cheryl Spite is. That's one of the questions we're going to get answered in here. War of Will has never won on this turf course, is winless in 2 starts, albeit very early on in his career. So, yeah, he's looking for a little bit of revenge. And I think more than anything, what I'm looking forward to is just the fact that with everything that's gone on in this world in 2020, my favorite race has not been impacted, and I'm extremely grateful for that. The field has come up here. It's a good field. It's a legit Grade 1 race. And whoever stamps themselves with that free ticket to the Breeders' Cup, they're going to earn it.
Great stuff, Jeff. Thank you so much. We look forward to chatting with you again soon. Lots more great stuff to come at this Woodbine meeting, so we'll have plenty of opportunities. Godspeed on Saturday, and we'll check in very shortly.
Sounds good, Peter. Always a pleasure to join you.
Hey, everybody. The In the Money Players podcast whiskey is here. This is a 6-year-old American malt whiskey chosen by me, made by our friends at Albany Distilling Company. I'm huge fans of them and their Ironweed series, of which this is one. Best of all, supports a great cause. Basically, you give money to the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation, and I will send you one of these bottles that I bought from the distillery, from this barrel that I picked. I love the whiskey here. If this would make a great gift, even if you're just a whiskey fan and don't know anything about the podcast, I highly recommend this. American malt whiskey it's not a unique category. There's plenty of them out there. There aren't too many that are as good as this. This stuff stands up really well. If you are a Scotch drinker who has a tolerance for bourbon, or a bourbon drinker who has a tolerance for Scotch, chances are you're going to really like what's in this bottle. Go to trfinc.org/players. Follow the instructions there and make your donation. trfinc.org/players to get yourself a bottle of this In the Money Players podcast American malt whiskey. Next up on the show, very happy to have my buddy from Woodbine back here with us, Jason Portundo. How are you, my friend?
Hey, couldn't be better. A huge weekend on tap. It seems like I say that every week. So, hey, glad to be a part of the show again.
It's been true, especially lately with this amazing Queen's Plate Woodbine Mile double. What's the atmosphere been like around the track? We saw you live from there last weekend.
Yep.
How did your plate day go, and what was the reaction, and what are folks thinking? What are the vibes heading into this it's the same weekend as usual, but right, it still feels so different, obviously, given everything going on and being so close on the heels of the Queen's Plate. What are the vibes at Woodbine?
Things are great. Wagering-wise, the numbers are really good, all things considered, obviously, with people not here. We've seen a huge spike in terms of our online wagering. We have HPI TV as the Canadian hub, and people are saying, you know what, it's the way of the new world. You want to gamble? This is the way you're going to have to do it. We had our 3rd largest Queen's Plate ever just last Saturday. So that was really good considering, again, the dynamics of 2020. But it is kind of weird to talk plate one week and then all of a sudden mile the next. It's kind of sports overload. I mean, everything is getting sandwiched into one, but I'm not going to complain because just go back, a good few months ago. Let's not go back there, right? So we're having a great time and doing the best of a not so good situation.
You're here to talk about these 2 Sunday Grade 1s, the Summer and the Natalma Stakes. Very eager to get your thoughts. Let's start with the Summer. It goes as race number 7. We're going a mile on the turf, and I'm very curious to hear what you came up with at this spot. What are your thoughts on this year's Summer? Who's going to punch their ticket for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf?
That is the $250,000 question, literally, Pete. I mean, these are 2-year-olds, right? I mean, you expect the unexpected. that's already the theme going into the campaign, considering the way things have been in 2020. But I mean, Gretzky the Great, I got to give him the edge. I mean, he goes in as a slight 2-1 favorite. He's got the home course advantage. He is stakes proven. Tammaro knows this horse well enough. I tried to beat him last time out and nearly did so, but I give him that respect. The American Monarch really intrigues me. And, Belmont could have had him in another race in early September at Saratoga, that being the With Anticipation. Didn't go there, opted for this spot instead. And that horse impressed me. I mean, the fractions weren't overly quick. And I know a lot we're expecting more from Secret Potion, but I think those two are also in play. My top pick, though, is actually going to be, I'm going to go with Dolder Grand. I tried him first time out. Many of us did. Just flat-footed. Wasn't awful, Pete, but just kind of flat-footed. And now he's going to get the rematch here with Download, who is, I don't think he's one of the contenders in here, but he is back, so I'm going to mention him since he won the race. But, Dolder Grand, I think, is going to fly under the radar. The pressure's off, and I really feel like he could be kind of a sneaky good play. But more logically speaking, as talked about, Gretzky the Great, American Monarch, ready to repeat. I'm not sure which way she's going to go in terms of that horse has been cross-centered. I do prefer the horse in the other spot, to be honest, but we'll wait and see.
Yeah, Ready to Repeat is entered in one of the sprints earlier in the card. We'll have to see which way they go. But you got to tell me the story on Dolder Grand. Clearly, this one bet to 8-5 on debut and didn't show what was expected. But is this one you've seen in the flesh? Is this one that there've just been a lot of stories about? What's the situation with Dolder Grand?
A pricey purchase, right? And it's Mark Casse. So you get Casse, you get Husbands, you get a horse that was, kind of the buzz horse first time out. And we see this so many times. It can be for the good and or for the bad, where horses, don't live up to that hype, and then we all go off the horse, and then the next start, the horse wins, right? And a horse, especially 2-year-olds, right, Pete? They can change from start to start, from day to day, literally. Like younger kids, sometimes it can be in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. I'm going to take a shot with this guy. I mean, I never like to just go the logical way. That's why Jeff Bratt and I are the perfect yin and yang, because he's more the conservative, logical, smart type of play. I'm kind of, that boys in the hood street sort of method here. I'm going to try to get the edge. I'm going to try and get me a good price. Sometimes I try to take too many shots, and he's right there looking at me. Here's a chalk player. You see that? He's right there. He's listening. And he just hit his desk, and some chalk flew up. That's all I got to say. All I'm saying.
A few notes. Well, first of all, it's always great to have those creative ideas, especially a lot of people listening to shows. They're looking for prices to throw in places. And, I am also a player who I love giving out prices when they're the horses I love, but I'll typically stick very logical. But people can often find those logical horses themselves. So we appreciate the creativity. And just another note on Dolder Grand, looking at this for another second, the fact that this one cost $800 in April of this year, that's 2-year-old training sale. And horses cost that much at 2-year-old training sales because they have speed. And this one, the way he broke on debut, did not get to show it. So you might see a whole different horse here, potentially, if this one can get away from there with a little more alacrity going a little bit farther today. So I like the creativity there. But I also think there's a world in which, especially if Ready to Repeat goes here, with Gretzky the Great, with potentially better breaking Dolder Grand, I think they're going to go fast and maybe set this up for American Monarch. This is one who, on pedigree, I think should absolutely love this spot. And I love Belmont. Belmont horses that win first out, they're not cranked to do so. This one almost has to move forward. And on speed figures, he probably does have to move forward to get to the likes of the numbers that Ready to Repeat and Gretzky the Great have run. But I just feel like it's a lot of the signs point this way for me. But I am going to take that extra look at Dolder Grand and consider including underneath, if not as a potential alternative in some of these horizontal plays. There is a pick 3 that starts here that closes with the next race we're going to talk about, which goes as race number 9, the Grade 1 Natalma. Basically, just flipping the script here for the opposite sex. We've got the fillies looking to punch their tickets into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies turf. And a few really interesting runners in this spot. So there's a lot of talent on display in this short field. Which way did you end up going?
I went Alda, so I'm going to tear a page out of the Jeff Bratt because I like the favorite. I loved her last time, and to be honest, if I had a physical ticket, I would have torn it up. I would have just ripped it because I thought she got beat. But there goes up the photo sign, and all of a sudden the photo sign comes down, and it's 5 or not, whatever number she was that day. And I was like, I think 3. I was like, are you kidding me? I thought she lost. I thought Dreaming of Drew won the race, and Jeff had picked Dreaming of Drew, so he thought he had the winner. But yeah, all things considered, Pete, it was a smaller numbered field in that last race and the Catch a Glimpse, and she got into traffic trouble. I couldn't believe it. And then Stevie Bayan had to alter course a couple of paths to get to the outside, so that stalls her momentum. You're not going north-south, you're going east-west, not a good thing. And then he got her into gear, and I thought she just missed, but she got up. And I think, she's got a big-time shot in this field. But I will say this as well. Live handicapping, if we get to post time and all those something crazy, even money, 6-5, I think that's crazy just because, again, we're talking 2-year-olds, and I know she's 9-5 on the line. Lady Spitespear, that was a smashing debut. This could be a big weekend for Fipke and Atfield. And the way she did it first time out, putting up that big 75 figure, if we see her at 5-2, maybe even 3-1, I would jump in on her because she's got good speed and she just might take them on a merry chase the entire flat mile.
She's my pick in here as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess she's going to be versatile because she did get lit up and look like a front-running type on the debut. But just given the hands that she's in, it would not shock me if somebody wants to go wild on the front end if she could sit just off as well. I made the point about Mod and the improvement from first to second. I think of the same thing with Atfield. Lady Shakespeare, you talked about the big weekend for Fipke. Big weekend for this female family. I forget exactly how it ties in, but is Lady Shakespeare also the second dam of Cheryl Spite? It's that same wonderful family that's produced so many great runners. And I think this one is very, very interesting.
Yeah, and Fipke, the cool story about him, he's a gemologist, right? So I've said this before, if there's a guy who can find a diamond in the rough, it is Charles Fipke. But because he breeds his own, he doesn't have to, right? That's the beauty of it. And this family, you talk about the lineage, the Cheryl Spite, and so on and so on. Roger says, physically talented, mentally issues. So he knows them well enough. So he knows what buttons to push and when to push those buttons, which is great. But yeah, it could be a weekend sweep for these guys. And you're right. She took the lead in that lone start. She doesn't have to be on the front end, Lady Spitespear. I really feel like she is, any kind, and really any kind. I like Alda a lot. I'm going to give honorable mention to Dreaming of Drew just because, she was right there as well last time out for Barb Minchell, who actually is our leading trainer when it comes to juvenile wins at this meet. But Sleek Lynx really intrigues me. And I know the horse is a maiden, just with one start under its belt, and that was at Gulfstream Park. The horse was favored that day, didn't do it. But if you're looking for a horse, just kind of a wise guy selection, Sleek Lynx for me if this horse gets the proper setup.
I'll mention one at a price as well. We're talking about that great female family on display with Lady Spitespear. How about the female family of number 2, Seasons? Winter Memories was such a popular runner and a horse I really loved, and from one of those Phillips families that had winners all over the place. This one did not earn the world's most impressive figure on debut, but would be absolutely no surprise to me to see run a lot better. A win is going to it would take a lot, but there is a scenario in which if the race were to fall apart a bit, if Alda were to find trouble, maybe this one can come late and get something done. I'll definitely be including underneath the verticals and might even have for just a penny on top. So few different ways to go. What else are you looking forward to this weekend? I didn't prep you for this, but is there another spot you gave out? I randomly asked you this question at the end of last week, and you gave out a 7-1 shot. So I'm curious if you have anything else at the top of your head.
I digress. I'm going to stay perfect right with my spot play. No. I'll give you something. Mark Cassidy has a debutante, so I'm going to go to another firster here. I think it's race 5 on Mile Day, so on the Saturday, so coming up tomorrow. Don't push your luck. I know post 12 is a tough ask at any point in time for a debuting 2-year-old, but even worse so on the inner turf. So she's really going to have to scat and scurry, if you will. That's scoot and hurry. Scurry, if you will, before that first left-hand bend. So I'm going to say don't push your luck. not as big a price as the last one I gave you, but I think just more logical, maybe around 5-2. But that's still okay. Well, not a 7-1 shot, but a $7 winner.
There you go. We'll take it. Jason, thank you so much. Godspeed with your work. I'm looking forward to watching you and Jeff spar some on the TV a little bit more, banging desks and hollering at each other and all that good stuff. Great to catch up with you, and I look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Anytime. Appreciate it, and have a great weekend. Enjoy the races.
Cheers, buddy. Next up to anchor the show, very happy to have back on the program, a horse player you know from Twitter, no doubt, if you're a horse racing Twitter person, where you can find him at ntam1215. He does a lot of other great work in the industry as well. He's a member of the Buyer Speed Figure team. He's been handicapping lately over at stevebick.com, doing this NYRA circuit that we're about to talk about. And then you can also find him via Twin Spires, doing some of the expert pick selections over there. Nick Tammaro, welcome back to the show.
Good morning, Pete. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm excited for this weekend. Well, the first three segments have all been about Woodbine, and obviously a lot of the eyes are going to be north of the border, but we don't want to forget the fact that this is opening weekend back at Belmont Park, and wanted to harken back to our old NYRA show where we did the pick five for Saturdays all the time. I thought it'd be fun if we run through this pick five sequence. It starts with race number 6. We've got 2-year-old maidens, colts, going 1 mile on the dirt. And we got a big favorite in here to kick off this pick five. Are you inclined to get stuck in with Engrave, or do you think you can be creative in this spot?
You know, I thought that Engrave ended up running into one of the better 2-year-old winners of the meet in Calibrate. And it was one of those situations where, Ricardo Santana Jr. is so good riding on the dirt, especially on speed horses. And he kind of let the field come to him around the turn. And you thought, oh gosh, this could be anybody's race. And then he kicked away again. And I remember, I felt like there was discussion after that race that he was going to go straight to the Breeders' Futurity, which I think says a lot about how Steve Asmussen feels about him. So I thought Engrave was a good second. One of the fun things about the fall at Belmont is that we get these 2-year-olds stretching out to the mile, and nothing about Engrave pedigree-wise or the way he performed on debut would indicate that the mile should be any kind of problem. So I think he's going to win. I think there are a couple of alternatives for anybody who wants to have another option. Both Repo Rocks and Likeable were second and third in an off-the-turf race on a day where the rail was the place to be. That being said, it was a slow race. It was an off-the-turf race. Nautilus is a horse that wanted, who had already failed on the dirt and ended up running on turf, then moved back to the dirt to win that race. So I guess if you're looking for maybe somebody outside of Engrave, it would be one of those two. Obviously, Todd Pletcher had an excellent Saratoga meet, and he also, in addition to Likeable, a part of that entry, he has Known Agenda, who's by Curlin, but is out of a grass dam. By Rama, was a 3-time turf winner, a stakes winner on turf. So I don't really see that horse being much of a threat on dirt. I think it's pretty much Engrave's race to lose.
I see it very similarly. I was going to run 80% through Engrave, maybe a little bit more, but I did want to include just a little bit of Repo Rocks for the various reasons to run better, including what you said exactly. I thought that was a day ground loss mattered, and that was a wide trip. So I'll have a little bit of 2. I was going to probably, and maybe this is foolish, but just from a value point of view, fade the Pletcher entry in the picks, just because, as you noted, I only really like half of the entry, and of course you're going to be getting penalized in terms of price. But I wouldn't argue with anybody who wanted to back up that way. It's just not how I was going to do it. I really do. All that said, we agree. The favorite is probably the one who's the right one to kick off this pick 5, which for our second leg, we move to race 7. We've got 2-year-old maidens on the turf here going 1 mile, and another spot where I was curious to get your take if this is one where you can zero in, or if you felt like given the big field and the 2-year-olds in the turf, is this a place you have to spread to keep this pick going?
Well, I'll tell you, anybody who wants to zero in here has my admiration. I mean, this looks really, really tough. There's some pedigrees. You're going to have amortization likely go off the favorite, and really for no other reason than because it's a Chad Brown trainee. And amortization looks a little bit like Public Sector from early in the Saratoga meet, who was victorious, I believe, on either Whitney or Travers Day. European bred horse. We've obviously seen Chad do very well, specifically for Klarovich, with these horses that were taken at Tattersalls. And amortization seems to be training decently. One thing about the Eurobred runners is that they generally don't train all that well. So Public Sector, I remember, ran on a day where the workout report sort of said that the other Chad Brown trainee in the race was training a lot better. And so we'll see. There's going to be a Belmont Clocker report available. I would say it would behoove all of us to take a look at some of the messages. As far as experienced horses go, Frankel at Ascot was probably going to finish third or fourth in that maiden race last time when she ducked into the rail. And so there's going to be some support there. It's very difficult to wire fields, bulky fields at a mile on the Widener. So I would probably use her as no better than a backup. I thought the interesting firsters were all drawn towards the outside. I wouldn't blame anybody who wants to give Momentita a shot for Michael Matz, who debuted at Laurel and fared well. But I thought that Island Treasure, Kerry Girl, and Batia were the interesting first-time starters. They all have pedigree. Island Treasure, whose sibling Windfall Prophet we'll see actually late in today's card, is by Speightstown out of Hit It Rich. Hit It Rich was a 4-time turf winner. This filly is a half to Profiteer and the aforementioned Windfall Prophet. Kerry Girl's the first foal out of Caroline Thomas, who was a graded stake winner on the turf, Pioneer of the Niles, excellent with first-time turf horses. And Batia is a half to Stellar Agent, who actually ran third to a newspaper of record in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Fillies Turf back in 2018. So there's a little bit of pedigree there. All come from barns that are capable of having one ready on debut. Barclay Tech had a big first-time out 2-year-old winner late in the Saratoga meet. So I'll use all three of those in addition to amortization, probably a little bit of Momentita. I wanted to make an excuse for Bryn Bella's debut because I love the pedigree, and this is a horse that should have some ability, but she just didn't do any running. So I'm wondering if that's a horse that maybe just fell short ability-wise, though she made out well pedigree-wise.
Yeah, I ended up landing on Bryn Bella in here with no excuse for the first race, which I hate to do. It's not generally a habit I want to get into of just saying, oh, well, maybe needed the debut. But the pedigree was such, and the hands she's in were such. And also, I felt like it was an interesting rider switch as well to Saez. I just thought there was an opportunity, perhaps, in what looks like a wide open race to get a price that might represent value on one that showed enough promise before the debut. But I could end up well regretting it, and I like the idea of spreading around. I think you make some good cases on pedigree for the firsters and amortization just based on the success that Connections have had in that sale. I do think needs to be left in, but it's hard to press up anybody in a race that's so open as this one. So I think we're of the same mind in attempting to spread around there. Who did you make your top selection in there?
I haven't chosen one in the final version. I have a feeling I'll pick Kerry Girl. I love that Bonner Young family with Bit of Whimsy in it. Bit of Whimsy is this filly's second dam. So that's likely the direction I'll go, looking for a little bit of a price. I mean, one thing I'll say about Bryn Bella that I don't want to sound dismissive of is that she did break slowly in a race completely dominated on the front end. So, and Caldy looks like a potential stakes horse. I mean, I would envision Caldy will probably show up in a race like the Miss Grillo next month at Belmont based on the way she ran, perhaps the Jessamine at Keeneland. That could end up being a situation where she improves quite a bit second time out.
We'll see what happens. That'll be an interesting line on that form as well. Seems like it could be a very relevant form line for the division. Let's talk about race number 8. We've got New York breds, 3 and up allowance types going 6 furlongs on the dirt. And I was uncreative in here. What did you come up with?
Yeah, I mean, a horse player that I learned from early on in my life told me that coupled entries are like smorgasbords with bad food. But I'm afraid that Flashpack and Barbie and Blitchton Lady just look like way too much for this bunch. Flashpack and Barbie's the one to catch. If she gets hooked up in a battle with She's a Super Freak, I suppose it could be a little problematic. But, she ran very well last time on the slop, chased a super hot pace, and really gave way grudgingly late. I thought it was speaking of Flashpack and Barbie, I thought she's improved. And she was the horse that we all saw kind of the panicky drop from back in early July, and she ended up running really well that day and actually has improved since. So I'm looking forward to seeing how she can fare in a race where I think she'll be in control from the start. I really thought that the only alternative to me was Banker's Daughter, who stepped forward in a nice way last time out to Breaker Maiden. Looks like a horse that could be getting better right now and is drawn favorably on the outside for a stalking trip.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I thought the entry had it between them, and I love that line. I hate it when I like a horse in an entry because you are typically getting penalized in terms of price, but this is a spot, at least in the picks, where I think I'm just going to single and move on, though you do mention it, a reasonable alternative at a better price for those looking to back themselves up at least a little bit. Let's move on to race number 9. We stay in the New York bred ranks. We're going 7 furlongs on the turf, 3 and up this time around. And I felt like this was just going to set up really nicely for number 7, Maxwell Esquire. Horse who I felt like had trouble at a key stage last time and just looks like one of the best finishers signed on in the race with plenty of speed. Also felt like the added ground could be his friend. It's one of the things when the turf racing, the turf sprint, switching from Saratoga down to Belmont, that you can sometimes get a little bit of an edge over the general crowd, is really trying to drill down into the horses who might be suited by the differences in the configurations. I like Maxwell Esquire a lot in this spot. Where did you end up?
Yeah, I actually faded Maxwell Esquire last time in a pick 5 that was beaten by a 40-1 shot in the last leg. And I felt very fortunate to get out of that leg. I thought he should have won. Didn't break all that well. Had to try and negotiate a trip through the inside. Joel Rosario actually gave him a great ride, and he had to pause once or twice really in the stretch before coming up a little bit short. So the interesting thing about the 7/8 at Belmont versus 5.5 at Saratoga is the turf sprints at Saratoga very much play like sprints, whereas I've always believed that 7/8 at Belmont plays a little bit more like a route. It's a race, I think, where it's very difficult to wire the field. You'll get some circumstances maybe where the rail's out or the turf has gotten very firm and speed will hold a little bit better. But in general, I don't think it does. So I thought Maxwell Esquire was clearly the horse to beat. Looks as if there's plenty of pace in here to set the table. But I love Opt. I'm going to use Opt and Maxwell Esquire. I'm going to bet Opt to win. I bet Opt last time. I thought he had absolutely no shot being as far back as he was. I don't really blame Javier Castellano, but that was Rinaldi out there tooling along on the lead and graded on a curve who ended up second. Now, those are horses. Obviously, Rinaldi is not eligible for this kind of race, but I mean, he would be 1-50 and graded on a curve would be a heavy favorite too. So I thought he just faced better horses that day. I think the lone time he's run poorly on the turf, he had a pretty clear excuse. I don't think he ran poorly last time. And I'm hoping that they really move because they're going to need to really move. He's a horse that doesn't have the early foot to stay within range. But, when push comes to shove, Pete, I'm not sure he's that much slower early than Maxwell Esquire. And so if they're coming from a comparable position, I'd rather take Opt at 3 times the price. But by no means am I going to be beaten by Maxwell Esquire in any kind of multi-race play. You
make great points about Opt, and Time Form Pace Projector does have them listed equally at the same position at the back. And yeah, just looking at closing sectionals, Opt should be on tickets here. And unlike Saratoga turf sprints, where I find the cutback to be a negative, I feel like 7, now this is anecdotal, I haven't looked at the numbers, but anecdotally, I feel like 7 furlongs at Belmont, for those reasons you were saying about how the races tend to play, that cutback can be a lot more of a positive. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, in general, I'm against them at 6 furlongs really or less, but I do think the mile and a 16th, mile and an 8th kind of to 7 furlong cutbacks work quite a bit better.
What are you doing with Shiraz in here? This was another one who my eyes keep going to as a potential to emerge as the best of speed from the scrum if either of our other two don't get going in time. Were you going to use anything that's going to be up near the front end in here, or are you just going to play this one to collapse?
It felt like only in 2020 could Shiraz win 2 straight, right? And then I was actually very surprised to see Mike Maker claim him back. And he ran well last time, all things considered. It depends on, from a race flow perspective, just how you want to approach the performance that he put forth last time, because really Maxwell Esquire made the only off-the-pace move. And Shiraz and New York's Finest were there right from the start. He's the best of the speeds at 7/8, I would say, because Fast Getaway, I don't think really wants 7 furlongs. And I thought Fast Getaway's last race was not pretty. And he's a horse that's gone out of form before. So I would say if there was a pace horse I would be inclined to use, it would be Shiraz. It would probably be either Shiraz or Call Me Harry, because I still think Call Me Harry has a little bit of upside and likely needed his last race. So it would be one of those two. I could see using both of those two as C's or in some kind of capacity like that, because you have to respect that Shiraz has gotten pretty good all of a sudden. One thing I'll note about him, and I wrote this down when he ran last time, is that we had a couple of trainers get on really big hot streaks at various points during Saratoga, and Shiraz ran when Mike Maker was going pretty well. Not as if his barn ever cooled off all that much, but that's just one thing to keep in mind. If he was a shorter price, I think you'd want to take on a negative like that, maybe a little bit more. But he's going to be a decent enough price and did end up drawing very, very well. Is also capable, I think, of letting some of that bigger speed go and then maybe pouncing when he's ready.
Making the move, getting into the race at the pace call. I just did, in my experience, especially in turf sprints, even though this is like a turf sprint, maybe with some air quotes around it.
Right.
If I like two that are going to be coming from out of it, I like to be able, for at least one backup, to have the horse I think could be the best of speed. So I feel a little bit better about including that one after chatting with you. Let's talk about the pay leg here, Nick. We move on to our 10th race, 3 and up, New York bred maiden claimers for $40,000, going 6 furlongs on the inner now, a little bit of a different ball game. How are we going to get paid in this pick 5?
Well, I'll tell you what, I think we're going to be thankful for Engrave and for the entry, because we're going to need to go deep here. I don't see how you can really be bold in any way, shape, or form. I thought there were probably a minimum of 5 horses that I would want to use. I can't really – it would take me a lot of work to separate the likes of Freudian Analyst, Fast Gordon, On the Couch, Mommy's Jewel, Disciplinarian, and Starship Empire. And I probably end up using all of those. I don't really like all of them, but I can envision scenarios where all of them could possibly win. I picked Starship Empire on top, I guess trying to be a little cute. Mission Impassable is not the greatest turf influence, but this colt has 3 siblings that are multiple winners on the turf, including Alien Invasion, who was a pretty nice turf sprinter in New York. So I just wanted to try somebody who I thought would be a price. I've gone down the Freudian Analyst pathway before. It felt in the middle of the Saratoga meet like I was finding creative ways to lose, and I had a big exacta under 3.99, and Benji Hernandez lost his iron at the 8th pole. And then got it back, and it was, just one of those kind of things that happens during the spa meet. But he came back and didn't really run that well. So, he was 4th last time behind Smite and gets a big jockey change to John Velasquez. Obviously, there's a family connection here, too, riding for his brother-in-law. But, Freudian Analyst is just not much horse. So you obviously want to keep that in mind. I thought that other horses we're talking about, On the Couch was purchased for $110,000. He worked well at the Ocala sale back in April of 2019. Went off 17-1 in a loaded field, and now they're just giving up on him. And I thought this is a horse with a really nice Aikendale pedigree, Half to My Dinah and Them Their Eyes, both trained by the late Kate Ferrin. The blinkers going on, the drop, Jorge Duarte, who generally has a very good record with everything, is 0 for 4 dropping second-time starters from maiden special weight to maiden claiming ranks. And the thing is, none of them have even hit the board. So it's a little bit of a negative, but at the same time, you look at this horse and you think to yourself, boy, if I caught the best price, if I got Opt Home, and if I caught the best price in the 7th and I lost On the Couch, I'd be annoyed. So I think he's a horse you have to use. I'm going to use Mommy's Jewel. As I said, Fast Gordon takes the drop. This is a good angle for Linda Rice, and I think he's probably deserving of one more shot on the turf.
This is a race where I hate my opinion, because I agree with everything you're saying about how open it is, and I end up my picks for the expert picks are going to end up being 3 of the favorites, and I'm not thrilled about it, but I feel like Fast Gordon makes a ton of sense, and I feel like Disciplinarian make a ton of sense, but I want as much as I can afford on these tickets. Where did you land on Disciplinarian? Anti, or just an include but not a press?
Include but not a press, I would say. Yeah, one that I would use as an A. Having 5 or 6 A's is usually not cost effective unless you have 1 or 2 singles. And I think that I'll play this with 2 singles. So I'll play this with 2 singles and a 2 deep leg. So I think that gives you a little bit of flexibility. And so he's one that I wanted in there. I thought he was kind of second by default when Benji Hernandez lost the irons last time. But he's a horse that's run well enough. He's run well at this distance. It would be foolish, I think, to exclude him. And at 4-1 or 9-2, whatever that range, I think that's probably a fair price.
He's going to get the right kind of forward trip, I think. And I can't use him and not include Freudian Analyst. And then there's the angles that you already mentioned with Fast Gordon. It just feels like they might just be being very realistic with that one. But give me everything I can afford. I wouldn't mind a 50 cent to all in this spot, honestly. Though I could probably carve out some of the wildly long prices. Though I think you make a very compelling case for why to include Starship Empire in this spot. Well, that does it, Nick. We've given the people our thoughts on this pick five. I thank you for coming on here. We've let folks know where they can find you, and hopefully we'll get you back on these airwaves soon to talk about some more Nairo, or we may draft you for a Stronach 5 show at some point too. It's always a pleasure getting to talk horses with you and having these conversations that I want to have off air anyway, and just getting to do them where people can listen in.
That sounds great. I look forward to it. Thanks for having me.
That's going to do it for this edition of the Racing Picks podcast. I want to thank today's guests, Dawn Lupul, Jeff Bratt, Jason Portundo, and Nick Tammaro. We want to thank our partners and sponsors, especially Racing Picks, of course, bringing you this show, as well as two of our founding partners, the Thoroughbred Retirement Foundation and 10 Strike Racing. But most of all, I want to thank all of you, the listeners and viewers, who make these shows so much fun to do. This show's been a production of In the Money Media. Our business manager is Drew Coatney. Our man pushing all the right buttons, doing all the technical things, producer Craig. DJ Unstable, Craig Gorbanoff. Our chief creative officer is Jonathan Kinchin. I'm Peter Thomas Fornital. May you win all your photos.
Just me.